The Institute of World Affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee presents International Focus, a weekly discussion of the people and events behind today's global headlines. Support provided by Milwaukee Public Television and the UWM Center for International Education. Now here's your host, Doug Savage.
Welcome to International Focus. At the conclusion of its recent sixth party plenum, the Communist Party of China designated President Xi Jinping as core leader of the party. The move places him on the same level as two of his most noted predecessors, Deng Xiaoping and Mao Zedong, leaders whose authority was not lightly questioned. Already acknowledged as the formal head of the party and the Chinese state, as well as commander of the military, Mr. Xi has spent his time in office effectively consolidating power, perhaps, some suggest, even beyond the end of his term in 2022. To provide insight into what this might mean both within China and for Beijing's relations in the region and beyond, we're pleased to be joined once again by David Buck, Emeritus Professor of History at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where he established himself as one of the nation's preeminent China scholars. David, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Doug. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'd like to start with a quote from a piece in The Atlantic from last year and get your thoughts. And The Atlantic says, Mr. Xi has, quote, embarked on an apparent effort to transform the people who make up the state rather than the structure of the state itself. So is there anything to this idea of rather than tampering with the org chart or the mechanisms of government, changing the nature of the bureaucrats?
Well, I think he is trying to make sure that the bureaucrats are not corrupt. That's one thing he's trying to do. He's also trying to get them to follow his directions from the top to the bottom. And in traditional Chinese government and in present-day Chinese government, often what the leaders say and what the local people do are quite different. And in traditional China, the communications were so poor that the emperor might not really learn what was going on down in the districts. Today, the communications are really thorough, but still people are able to get away with remarkable things in the provinces. I was down in Yunnan province, way down in the southwest, this spring, and one of the people who runs, or the man who really ran the city of Kunming, was a man named Qiu He. He was very popular there because he really developed the city and brought modernization to the city in an incredible way. He also was corrupt. He was removed at the end of 2015. He was removed. Yet people in Kunming, they still praised him because, and that's the problem that Xi Jinping has, that it's so easy for people to deviate at the lower levels of the government that he has to try to remake all of the bureaucrats in the image of the central party.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about just the structure. I mean, obviously the party is still the sort of glue that holds things together, but how is the bureaucracy really set up from the national level on down to the provinces?
Well, there are clear steps, and those are very closely defined, but there's so many units and there's so many people that in order to get things done at any level, you have to go out and work with businessmen and with all kinds of ordinary people and with corporations, and that's where the problems come in, because it's so easy. When you're corrupt, you get things done. Corruption gets things done, and that's what officials are really judged on, or have been judged on, is how much they have accomplished. So people like Qiu He, he's just an example. There are people like that all over China. They've been getting a lot done, but they haven't been following the rules, and they have been corrupt. So what Xi Jinping would like is for people to get things done but not be corrupt. And there's no real pattern for that. There has to be some grease in order to have the machine turn. And so what people are doing now, officials at all levels, they're frightened. They know what they've done in the past and how they operated in the past, but they're worried, can we continue this way? Probably not. So why do anything? So things are running very much more slowly these days.
So, traditionally, perhaps as oversimplification, but sort of Confucianism was sort of the cultural glue that helped things move forward. During Mao's era, I think that was certainly less in favor, right? And
yes.
And then with the market reforms, there's sort of creeping capitalism. So what is the glue that's going to hold all of this together now?
Well, Xi Jinping thinks it's going to be a disciplined Leninist party and an authoritarian party. What they're afraid of is that if they lessen their authoritarianism and lessen this central control, that they could have what happened in Russia, in the Soviet Union, could happen to China. And I think whenever we are talking about China, we have to keep in mind that they watched Russia disintegrate, the Soviet Union disintegrate into Russia, and they don't want that to happen. So they're keeping up their guard very strictly to try to avoid that. So the glue is Leninism, which is a strong central party that is able to transmit its message throughout the society. The difficulty is when you have market reforms, when you have middle-class people, and there are tens of millions of middle-class people in China today. It's really astounding the prosperity that has come to China. They don't often are not willing to follow this Leninist discipline.
And I think that's one of the things that Mr. Xi has pointed out. There was this erosion of that sort of revolutionary zeal. Right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how can you be the difference between the early communists and they really had a tough time. They lived tough lives. They used to refer to the women who continued to stay with the communist leaders as Amazons because they were so tough. Well, that's not the way things are today. The way things are today is that people they live good lives. They send their children to college. They send them overseas. They drive fancy automobiles. The whole lifestyle of the communist leaders has been totally transformed and become much more luxurious and comfortable. And comfortable people are hard to make them really follow the central discipline.
So what is there in Mr. Xi's biography that sort of prompts him to take that older
It's
approach?
fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating that he grew up as one of the communist elite. His father was a top level Chinese official who was very early was sent to the provinces, demoted. And Xi Jinping, during the Cultural Revolution himself, was sent out to the countryside. But that experience made him a true believer. He had brothers and sisters and friends who had the opposite effect on, that they decided, we don't want much more of this Maoist life. But Xi Jinping he said, this is fine, I like it. And when he came back after the Cultural Revolution, he quickly became mentored by some of the old line Communist Party people. So he became a true believer. And I've never met Xi Jinping, but I've met some people that had the same experience, that you would think for most people in China, most Chinese people who went through the Cultural Revolution, they said, oh, I don't want any more of this. I don't want this kind of life. This is craziness. But some people came through and they had renewed faith in the Communist Party. And that's what Xi Jinping is. He's a true believer. He thinks that the Communist Party is absolutely necessary. And he's very disrespectful towards democracy. He doesn't believe in democracy. So he believes that only through authoritarian government can China succeed, and in fact, world politics should be conducted on a kind of authoritarian model.
Well, you've shared with us some sort of high points of his career. We've got some slides here maybe we can take a look at. Here's the first one. Tell us what's going on here.
Well, this is part of the elevation of Xi Jinping. This was last year. They had in the fall. They had a big parade in Beijing, the biggest military parade in Beijing in decades, to celebrate the victory of China over Japan in what we call World War II and what they call the anti-fascist war. And Xi Jinping was at the center of it. And they had this incredible display of military might. And Xi Jinping riding in a Chinese-made car, specially fitted out. So he was kind of the center of the whole thing. And this reflected to me, I was in Beijing at the time, and it was on television for 3 days before and 5 days afterwards, nonstop. That China is now a very powerful country, and Xi Jinping is the leader of that country, and that in order for things to go well, you need a leader like Xi Jinping. So that's what has been going on in China. Xi Jinping came to power in 2012. This was 2015, and it just keeps growing. That more and more emphasis is put upon him as the core leader. But the core leader is surrounded by he's the core of a central leadership group, and it's very easy for us to start thinking that the communist leaderships are dictators, but in fact they've always stressed collective leadership. Even the Stalinists talked about collectively. They always have a group around them that echo their views, and that's what's true in China. That they see Mao, Deng Xiaoping, and Xi Jinping are all trying to make themselves the center, but not the absolute dictator. They want a core of people. Xi Jinping would like this core to start at the top and run all the way down to the villages. It's pretty hard to make that happen. It only worked under Mao Zedong. That was the only time that you could really get people at the top and the bottom to be seeing exactly the same thing. Xi Jinping is trying to recreate that. It's very difficult.
Well, let's look at some of the other slides as we go along here. Okay, here is the National People's Congress.
Well, this was this spring, and this set the national goals, and it happens every few years. They have one of these national congresses. But I also want to ask people to look not only at the words, but the picture behind it. This is the Great Hall of the People shown in a panorama photograph, and it is so modern, so up to date, so 20th century, 21st century, I'm sorry. So 21st century that if you go to the Congress of the United States, it looks like it did 100 years ago, mostly. In China, everything has changed, even the Great Hall of the People. It's been remodeled, made renewed. And that's the aspect of China. Everything's new. The roads, the houses, the factories, the entertainment, the clothing, everything is new. And I think that has a huge impact. People in China are feeling good about themselves and good about their lives. And when you walk into this hall, you think, my gosh, what a powerful country I live in, right. And what a great success China has been.
Well, I think this next slide, Mr. Xi would argue, is what underpins all of that prosperity.
That's right. That's right. It's listening to the party, and this is a little pamphlet. Certainly wasn't printed and very popular. Doesn't have a lot of pictures or anything, but here it was published this January, and the idea was to get people in the party to become more disciplined.
So is this the 21st Century Red Book?
In a way, it is. In a way, but it's not carried out in the same way. This is for party members, and it hasn't penetrated. The Little Red Book was recited by everybody throughout China. I mean, it was. I was in China in the early 1970s when the Little Red Book was still in use, and people would refer to it and quote it all the time. This is not going to be quoted. This is for the party members. They'll probably among themselves begin to use it, but it won't penetrate society in the same way.
This is an internal memo for the Bureau.
Right. Yes, I think that's a good expression of it.
Okay. Well, let's go to the next slide. Oh.
Well, one of the things that Xi Jinping has done is really raise his stature as a military leader. That some of the people who've been purged from the party are top military leaders. And Xi Jinping has been trying to bring the army and the military under his control. There's been a huge military modernization. That is, prosperous China has turned a lot of their money towards making themselves a 21st century military power. This is a new class of Chinese destroyers. That's quite modern navy. Xi Jinping is there. This is just after he came to power in 2012, and he is head of the Central Military Commission. That's a position that Mao Zedong had, Deng Xiaoping had. So there he's out there inspecting and getting closer to the military in 2012. The next slide is one that shows him as the new head as the commander-in-chief. He was elevated this year to not head of the Central Military Commission, but the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And there he is inspecting the military officers in August. So he's taken over a much greater control of the military, and that's a reflection of his centralizing power. That's not too hard to do. I mean, if you're head of a government, it's not too hard to get control of the military. What's really hard is to get control of the business people. And
we have another slide.
And the next slide is this is last month. He's in Beijing, and he and other top officials of his government are out meeting the state-owned industries. These are the biggest industries in China, the least efficient industries in China, that have millions of people working for them in the oil and gas industry, in the communications industry, in the automobile industry, the really big, heavy industries. And they're people who have been called upon to become liberal, especially under Deng Xiaoping and after 2000, the Chinese economy has blossomed, made these incredible advances because these people were able to do more of what they wanted to do and become liberal. In lots of instances become corrupt. Now Xi Jinping is telling them, no, you got to listen to the party. And they're party people in every one of these industries in key positions at all levels, and he's trying to increase the party discipline. What does that mean? It means that people are going to be less able to be innovative. They're going to have to toe the party line. They're going to have to watch what they do in order to start new products or end old lines that aren't working as well. But Xi Jinping is placing party discipline, party correctness above economic efficiency.
Is there any fear that people who have enriched themselves and have substantial means and standing in society are less likely to just come on board?
I think so. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think people are worrying about what they did in the past. There's no question about that. But they're hoping that if they reform their ways and follow Xi Jinping's directives from that little pamphlet that we saw, that maybe they can escape the party discipline. So I think that's going to be the change we're going to see, is the more and more party discipline.
So talk a little bit, if you would, about just this concept of core leader in its historical context and practically what that means.
Well, the term really didn't exist until Deng Xiaoping began using it in the 1990s. But as I said before, even back in Mao's day, although he was totally dominant, he had a core of leadership that agreed with him. He'd done some amazing things, especially before 1949, in bringing the Chinese Communist movement to power. After 1949, it turned out that his economic and political programs were not as successful. And yet people still, the top leadership still mostly remained loyal to him. So they continued with him, even though he removed people like Liu Shaoqi and caused Liu Shaoqi's death. He was a right-hand man of Mao. So, but when Deng Xiaoping took over after Mao's death, 1978 is when Deng Xiaoping came to power. Deng Xiaoping was really a master at playing off the conservatives and working with the liberals. He really was a master at that. And he managed, because everyone agreed they didn't want to go back to a Maoist style, he played things very, very well over the 20 years of his leadership. After that, in many ways, Jiang Zemin was supposed to be a core leader. He's the man who succeeded Deng Xiaoping. He and the later generations of leadership have not had that same power. What Xi Jinping is trying to do is recapture that aura. But the situation is so different. Under Mao, it was the communists either were going to succeed or lose their lives. Under Deng Xiaoping, China was either going to stay a backward country or it was going to develop. Under Xi Jinping, the question is, what's going to be China's role? And what he wants is China to be a dominant power in the world. He wants to assert Chinese power in the South China Sea, make sure that all the territories that have had the label China on them in the past continue that. That's his goal. So he's calling on nationalism, pride in Chinese history to make his case. And I think it sounds very well. It plays very well in China. I think most people in China are very, very proud of what China has accomplished, and they want to see China play a bigger role in the world. And they are being told, and I think most of them agree, that democracy doesn't work. This is something anathema to our way of thinking, but they're being told that democracy doesn't work.
Well, we've got just about a minute left, so what do you think is the biggest challenge he faces right now?
The biggest challenge he faces is the economy, the way the economy is working. And China is very prosperous. It's growing very quickly. I mean, 6.5 to 7% economic development is remarkable. But on the other hand, there are a lot of weak spots in the Chinese economy. Too much overinvestment, too many steel plants, too much coal, and they really don't have solutions for those things. This is a country of 1.3, 1.4 billion people and they need jobs, and they need to be able to sustain themselves.
Well, we'll have to leave it at that. There's certainly no small consequences when you're talking about a fifth of humanity.
Exactly.
We'll keep an eye on that story. David Buck, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Our viewers, we'll see you next time.
For information about the Institute of World Affairs and its many programs, or to become a member of the Institute, call 414-229-3220, or visit us at our website,